it actually transpired that I think they were look, if we get 50% of it done, it will buy us a little bit of time to buy this new landfill. But when we get into it, the process was running really well, achieving more than anybody expected. Diverted more than the 50%, up to 80% away from landfill. They weren't giving it away for free. They were able to charge a price for this product, and to this day that company has never bought the second landfill.
Last number of 10-15 years where it's been that real difficult material where they just stockpiled it, put it to one side, put it into landfill. But as R&D moves on, technology moves on, we can then start extracting that nasty material and then start processing that.
That brings this additional wash plant into almost to a different level. You know, you have to scrub the sand as well. You have to be mindful that the clay content has to be removed. Your organic content has to be removed. And now we have recycling plants dotted throughout France that are achieving metal and blue, super metal and blue results.
I spoke about the environmental impact, but I think also on the flip side of it, there's also the financial gains for the customer as well, i.e. the return on investment on, instead of sending material to landfill at high landfill charges, repurposing that material and then in essence selling it straight back out into the construction industry. So
where's the best place to achieve 25% carbon saving, you know, or a 25% reuse or recycling metric within a new build? Because we're not going to put recycled doors on, you know. So that's the easiest place. 2/3 of the waste that we generate in Europe, actually globally, I think, is construction demolition waste. So and there's a method, a process to bring that back in and use it in a highly comparable way to the virgin material. And you tick all those boxes, James, that you mentioned, and we're left then with a proper, you know, circular economy.
The big problem probably facing not CDE. We can do it. We've got the technology to do it, and we've proven it all over the world. The big challenge probably comes in the acceptance of those materials, probably for our customers, just getting those materials to be accepted into not the low value fill jobs or trenching, getting them uplifted in the quality they actually meet, but it's getting them accepted into concretes and asphalts and stuff like that. Was probably the next step that Australia faces, is just that acceptance.
Welcome to today's episode of CD Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren McMaster, part of the marketing team here at CDE. And I'm joined today by some of my regional colleagues. First up, we've got Michael Bibby. Mike joined CDE in 2017 and has developed a strong network in the waste recycling sector in the northeast of England. Next up, we have James Murphy, Head of Business Development for Australasia and Southeast Asia. James brings over 13 years experience in the waste recycling sector. And then we have Ewan Kelly, Head of Business Development for Europe. Ewan joined CDE over 20 years ago and has been a huge advocate for developing the construction, demolition and excavation waste sector globally. In today's episode, we're going to be chatting among the group here about the innovative world of construction, demolition and excavation waste recycling. The first CD&E project was sold by CDE in the early 2000s. So we've been delivering within this sector for over 20 years, diverting over 180 million tonnes globally from landfill. Ewan, you've been here for a good part of that journey. Do you want to give us, kick us off with a wee insight into how things started and what developments you've seen?
Yeah, I can. Around the first days, most people will not believe I was here for over 20 years, you know, but with my youthful good looks. No, it has been a fantastic journey. You know, that journey started out in the northwest of England on a landfill site. We'd actually already done a project, a wet processing project for a customer, and through the conversation, they had communicated that the landfill was coming to the end of life, and they were in the search for a new landfill. And through their willingness and our innovative spirit, we decided that we would put together a wet processing solution that, always remember the term, like it was just wet it, you know, and we can wet it and do something with it. We'll give it, you know, divert it away from landfill and give it away for free. It actually transpired that I think they were look, if we get 50% of it done, it will buy us a little bit of time to buy this this new landfill. But when we get into it, process was running really, really well, achieving more than anybody expected. Diverted more than the 50%, up to 80% away from landfill. They weren't giving it away for free. They were able to charge a price for this product, and to this day, that company has never bought the second landfill. And it's, supposed to jump to the very end of that journey really quickly. And that first requirement was to wet the material. Up until today, where I'm sure you'll both agree, the requirements coming now from this waste, this troublesome, difficult material to handle, trying to meet the specification and being handed a specification requirement that you have to meet, probably shows just the journey we have been on. And there's no real accident. CDE is so deeply ingrained in sand production. At the very early days, recycling technology was always designed to divert material from the pond. So a very effective and efficient way of processing material before sustainability became a thing. Effectively, that's what that was doing. So we understood how to make sand for the construction business. All we had to ever do was try to work out what steps that material had to go through to now make a sand out of this, or an aggregate out of this new material we're being handed. And look, yes, I've been involved in most of that journey, and throughout the world actually, as we expanded this technology globally. I've been very fortunate to be a part of that journey, and something that I've been really passionate about, and really excited to see grow. And to be fair, we're only scratching the surface of it. We can go way, way beyond. And the big part of this is probably our customers as well. We meet customers every single day who have fantastic ideas, really innovative, really hungry to see how they can change their market, and by changing their own local market, but actually changing the global market.
What were the materials like in them early days? Is it still quite comparable to what you see today, or was it not as difficult a material, or was it just as bad?
No, actually, interesting point. The more we have installed these solutions, the more difficult material we see, and that's right enough. So the people who are running the C&D wash plants maybe don't have access, can't be as choosy about the material they're getting. So that's also been part of the innovation. You'll take some parts of North England, Mike, where you'll have the geology will present a really nice materials, and if there was one plant and one operator up there, they could pick and choose that nice material. But now we know that we have quite a few flags in the ground, few operators running. The geology changes quite, but probably presents as a more difficult materials in certain places, but nobody can pick and choose, really.
Yeah, I think over the last number of 10-15 years where it's been that real difficult material where they just stockpiled it, put it to one side, put it into landfill. But as R&D moves on, technology moves on, we can then start extracting that nasty material and then start processing that. So I think for me, I do see some nasty material coming through, but it's because the R&D and the technology means you can produce that material.
You process it.
Yeah.
I think one thing we demonstrated over the last 20 odd years, and certainly the case studies and the examples that we bring to the public domain, it's pretty much highlighting the fact that don't consider it as a material that you just want to avoid. There's a method of treatment. We've developed the process with the innovation of the customer, with the innovation of the market or the demand of the market. From that first case where we were saying, let's just wet the material and we'll do something with it. As I say, now we're getting really, really tight specifications. Can you make that out of this difficult material? The Paris region, very high clay content. Central belt of Scotland, very high the clay content. West of London, very high sticky, difficult plastic clays to break down. But those aren't barriers anymore. No, we just know how to how to process that. And again, it goes on multiple stages. So you have the the biggest thing that we have to do is get it into the plant. You know, to develop the R4500. You know, for that conditioning and for that high production into the plant. So that's the first critical step that we would always face the buyer. The more difficult materials we had, the less chance we had to get them into the system in the first place. Then the liberation, the breakup of the clays, the release of the sand and aggregate particles from the clay. And that's only part of the job. You know, now we have to go and take the sand and do something with it, you know, and classify the sand in from this that has now been liberated from that clay. Yeah.
James, when we think of Australia, it's one of those markets where there's generally tighter environmental legislations and health and safety. Is that presenting an opportunity or is that presenting a challenge?
Yeah, the challenge probably at the material, don't get me wrong, we can produce in the same way Union has said that there are specifications that our customers put on us to meet or adhere to a certain output quality. The big problem probably facing not CDE, we can do it, we've got the technology to do it and we've proven it all over the world. The big challenge probably comes in the acceptance of those materials, probably for our customers, just getting those materials to be accepted into not the low value fill jobs or trenching, getting them uplifted in the quality they actually meet, but it's getting them accepted into concretes and asphalts and stuff like that. That's probably the next step that Australia faces, is just that acceptance piece. And that gets born out of multiple reasons. You know, the quarries, there's less and less near to those urban environments. The quarries are getting further and further away, so just for saying it. And you've got those carbon footprint pressures, with the transport cost pressures. It's all happening to a virgin aggregate becoming less and less appealing. And here we are with construction and demolition waste in those big cities, you know, with a product right on your doorstep. And I was just getting the engineers, the construction or civil engineers, sorry, to, I suppose, not necessarily to take a punt, but just back themselves in on their own intuition sometimes. But they're fearful of, you know, stand up, you make a mistake in your notice type thing. But and that's a very simplistic view. It's not just one civil engineer, but it's a whole industry body, really.
Look, and it's a very traditional industry. You know, the construction industry has their way of doing things, and they don't change it if you don't have to. Look, you've been part of the diversion of over 180 million tons of C&D material, waste material from landfill back into construction applications. You know, achieving the C33, the EN12620, the equivalents of those around the world. We have ultimate faith. So does the people who are washing this material, producing this material, getting it certified. And I understand, you know, I understand from a legislation point of view that legislators will be afraid, because waste is quite a broad spectrum of a conversation, and of course they always will try to close up any loopholes, and maybe not everybody can be credited to be as legitimate in their pursuit of diversion from landfill and repurposing material as CDE have been. And you take the process, you look at the process today, and the process is as robust purely for high-end quality output. That's the ultimate goal. It has to work. It has to work as a process, but it also has to work as a material for our customers then to be able to sell in to the construction industry as a comparable, as equally comparable product as the natural product. You know, and in many cases, like 75% of the concrete worldwide is non-structural. You know, that because it's as high as that. Yeah, and there's a massive opportunity for materials, and like for me, I think legislation has to. Well, legislation will do what it does. Legislation will go through the proper channels and do their piece. I actually think the industry needs to maybe have a little bit of a different or alternative look at it, and instead of using the certification model that we have today, we should go to an application model. So you specify by application. You don't specify in a very broad brush. You know, if we have a C25, a C35, a C45 or equivalent strength in concrete, there's no reason why we couldn't be using different products to make that concrete. And nobody's saying, okay, you have to build a bridge or a skyscraper with recycled material. But there's definitely applications where we shouldn't be using the natural
Yes.
high strength products, but they're a very, scarce resource and getting scarcer by day. So we could use them for
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with C&D recycling. The natural resources are just depleting at such an alarming rate. I read an article on it, and we're using the resource of 2 planets at the moment. That resource isn't going to last very long. So the need for C&D now, if you look at how we can condition the sands to go into concrete, so i.e. use the CSCU, the classification unit. For me, how you can tone into to be able to produce a virgin spec from a natural material is, for me, it is a complete game changer to the industry.
And exactly with the technology that exists now, Mike, the ability to almost disregard the variability that's coming into the past. So okay, we accept that in the geographical region, 10 miles or kilometers north, south, east, or west, your geology will change. So we can actually disregard the fact that it's going to be variable. We accept that.
Yeah.
You know that. So that's part of the understanding. But the correction points through the plant. So with the CFCU, for example, they will then provide a consistency of material out. And I've always, been guilty of responding to the challenge with the spec sheet, a grading sheet, and say, look, there's 5 gradings from natural and 5 gradings from recycling here, and you pick what you want which. We should have a 50% chance. And these are that consistent, that they mirror the natural sand curves of that geology.
Yes.
And it makes sense because you're only operating in that geology, so that region, so the geology is pretty consistent. You're going to make that pick of sand they're used to. And then you'll have probably different elements throughout the world that you guys will be aware of. There's unique little changes in it. Within France, for example, there's a very strong reliance on the methylene blue test for organics and clays. That brings the traditional wash plant into almost to a different level. You have to scrub the sand as well. You have to be mindful that the clay content has to be removed. Your organic content has to be removed. And now we have recycling plants dotted throughout France that are achieving methylene blue, super methylene blue results, and almost in disbelief that it came from a recycled material. It was something that was destined for landfill in the first place. And as opposed to your point, or to both of your points, and tie it up, the resource is getting less and less because we're using so much of it. But then we have to travel so far to get it.
Yes.
That as you say, the carbon focus now, or the carbon reduction focus, is so much that people are being very conscious about where this material is and how far it has to travel in order to be used. So if we bring that back to your application model, people can decide, an urban quarry operating, washing C&D material, so it doesn't have to travel out of a city, and then the new material has to travel back down again. You can decide that, okay, this material is going to this application. So very quickly then we can reduce the burden of the quarry, we can reduce the burden of transport, and ultimately then reduce the CO2 impact that would have, and at no consequence to the application. We're not affecting it in any way.
Yeah. I think we spoke about the environmental impact, but I think also on the flip side of it, there's also the financial gains for the customer as well, i.e. the return on investment on, instead of sending material to landfill at high landfill charges, repurposing that material and then in essence selling it straight back out into the construction industry. So it's the financial gains as well for the customer as well as hitting that declinable.
With most customers, don't only take one revenue from it, that's a hand-on revenue, or whereas you're getting another bite of that cherry, you can actually resell that back in again.
Yeah. I was going to say, well, Mike, you probably finance side of it as well, but I sort of bring this up to the sort of the bigger and bigger projects that are now happening around the world, and those tier 1 contractors. Probably at times they've won it based on the price, or won their project based on the price. But another area of that tender process that they've been scrutinised on is their ESG, that their sustainability goals, and how they're actually measured against that. And what you can get now, and there's been some great examples through the UK and into Scotland, just with the environmental product declarations side of things. So you're actually stating on your 7, 10, on 14 nil aggregates about what the the carbon has been,
Yes. Yeah.
whatever the word is for it, sorry, but the footprint of that material. Compare that against virgin aggregates, even on the transport costs that we've mentioned, getting into the cities from further away. Like, that's a big driver for these guys, that they should be embracing this material more often, particularly where you said application specifically.
Applications were sorry, and the fact that 75% of the concrete used is non-structural, so it would use, like, where's the best place to achieve 25% carbon saving, you know, or a 25% reuse or recycling metric within a new build, because we're not going to put recycled doors on, you know. So that's the easiest place. 2/3 of the waste that we generate in Europe, actually globally, I think, is construction demolition waste. So and there's a method, a process to bring that back in and use it in a highly comparable way to the virgin material. And you tick all those boxes, James, that you mentioned, and we're left then with a proper, you know, circular economy where we're reusing it. And we've been guilty of it as an industry, of a very linear approach. You know, this, you know, extract, use, and dispose. That conversation has changed. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a very different world 20 years ago. You know, you were really trying to change the herd, the direction of the herd coming towards you. You know, like the conversation, people are aware of it, people are understanding of the benefits of doing it, understanding their own financial benefits of doing it as well. But it's just more it's more the confidence behind it. You know, it's more that we can produce a material that can be used and compared to any material
Against the virgin material.
Yeah, exactly.
But especially in the UK, so for your local authority, for your infrastructure jobs, what you'll tend to find is when aggregate suppliers are tendering for local authorities, that there has to be 50, sometimes 75% of recycled material within that tender document. So that just puts the importance on the recycling aspect of it, that even local government authorities are starting to buy into the circular economy and start to drive it. And it just puts that importance behind how economically it is important for the right environment.
And they still want the quality.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's asking for a step in quality. So if it's a 25% recycled material, it's even for drainage, you still want the clay removed. They still want the draining capacity from that material. You know, so that's where it's where maybe definitely the two tracks are going parallel, and they will cross over and join at some point, where the demands being put in construction will recognize that the ability is there to do it. And I see, actually, even there's a number of projects throughout Europe, in Australia as well, and I think a few in the UK, where people are actually gearing up for that change in their area, or that change. And what they've done is maybe install a wash plant with the capability of doing both.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, a natural gravel processing plant will never process recycled material, but a recycled plant will process the natural. And we get that now, where we see, look, can we have a setup? We've won the excellent setup in France, where the stockpile conveyors are radial, so it allows them to swap over into different bales.
Yes.
And they've actually completely opposite ended their projections. They felt they would have done 80% natural, 20% recycling now, and they're driving cycling nearly 90% of the time, and only doing natural to complement some projects that they have to do. So
something you sort of got me thinking about there when they talk about that, you know, being prepared, or, you know, installing a wash plant that's got the capability of doing both. The biggest shift for me to see this acceptance, or this growth, or the future projections of recycled materials. Your traditional hard rock or virgin quarry operators, and those tier 1 companies, the PLC companies around the world, it's their drive through acquisitions to buy up companies that do this recycled material. That, you know, because obviously with your recycled material, somebody's missing out on sales, and that's people selling virgin aggregates. So instead of trying to fight it anymore, we've sort of accepted that the market and the industry's moved in that direction, and they want to be hard.
they want to be part of it because now they see the confidence as well too.
How much we done.
Yeah, and that confidence is being built over the CDE, especially over the last 20 years.
That's right.
And if you look at government backed figures, so There's a government target out at the moment that there's going to be plus 300,000 new homes built in the UK over the next 12 months. All them infrastructure, all them roads in, all the drains and so on and so on. All that material is primed for recycling. Why use natural resources when we can use what's already in the marketplace and already being used?
And it sort of brings us a little bit back in the loop about the question you asked earlier, James, about the material. Has it changed much, the income material? One of the other aspects I have seen evolve over the last number of years, the recent years, is the installation of a recycling plant with the capability of moving on to the different processes within that, so it's left capable for upgrade
Yes.
in the future for your contaminated soil, for your value added production, where maybe the market isn't just exactly right yet for it. Maybe the confidence isn't in that market, or maybe the material that we're receiving is quite easy. Maybe we class it as easy now, but easy to process now. But with one eye on what the future will be, the contaminated soils, the more difficult soils, or somebody else comes into the market. And that's one thing that people shouldn't be really afraid of, is other people coming into the market, because it only bolsters the market itself, the confidence in the process, in the industry. And like, we don't have as big a job to do anymore about convincing people, and that the whole transition now is more, it's actually more defined by the customer saying to us that this is the way we're going to step it up. We're going to do this now, and we'll have it prepared for the future, because I can see one way it's going.
I think for me, the way the industry's moved, where from back 2005 when we put the first C&D plant in, to where we actually are at the moment, how the market trends have changed. So got customers starting to put trommel fines through a C&D plant. We got customers who was putting load sweepings through a trommel fines plant, which for Dombey was another sector in its own right. But because they are doing the technology what we brought forward, we're now producing plants, which is in essence you could call one-stop shop. Materials coming in with the process in different waste streams. So for me, and producing material from them waste streams and then producing high quality product at the other end, it's just, for me, it is a complete game changer to the industry.
And then the other simple bolt-ons like that, Mike, to sort of, again, prepare them for a bit of diversification or an additional revenue stream. It's like opening themselves up to wet waste.
Exactly.
Because it's just the method of actually receiving the product or the material out of the truck. But you've got everything else there.
Exactly. But it just also changes that company's portfolio, that business model of the customer, where he's not just producing C&D waste, he opens the revenue streams with the CBA plant. It's opening them revenue streams to be able to produce.
That's what keeps us on our toes. Why no? Because that's one of our biggest strands of innovation, is the ambition of the people we talk to, the partners we have, the customers telling us what they would like to see and what they would like to do. And okay, with sometimes the odd head scratching, these like, to yourself, I don't know how I'm going to bring this back, but we'll tie it anyway. And yes, of course, there's a way, because back to that thing, we know we're that ingrained in the sand production. We know how to produce sand. Just need to work out the process that needs, the steps that the atmosphere needs to take in order to get it out there. And that has been lent on. We've been processing the C&D waste for 20 years. But one of the big kick-on projects was a real difficult, sticky clay outside Dublin in Ireland. That was one of our early catapult moments, when we actually washed this material and were able to produce a quality aggregate, a quality sand out of something people said couldn't be washed. But if I look at that material today and look at some of the materials I've seen down in Melbourne, or some of the materials I've seen in Manchester or Central Belt Scotland, they're not really different.
It's the norm. It's the norm now, isn't it?
They're not different. We've educated ourselves long before we needed to do it, and I suppose it's about knowing how to cross-reference the different sectors and within the industry, is how to take the best out of the experience that we have learned and to implement it then for the day.
Yeah. You mentioned the geographical spread there too. Look, just to tie it in, the fact from each one it was different. They look the same, but test them up in the lab. They tested the same, you performed the same, and that bank of research and development that we've got again over the 20 odd years that we've been doing this. means that the next one that comes in, it's not going to be a surprise. Oh yeah, we've got that back data of information. We've tackled this before. There aren't any more surprises.
That's right. You'll see some variances where you'll have the water treatment slightly bigger or slightly smaller, depending on the clay or the fines content or the aggregate processing side. But on the whole, yeah, they're broadly the same. But again, it goes back to that, as you say, the bank of data that we would have that says, okay, we know this region, we know how it performs, we have a pretty good idea, in the first conversation, what the process needs to look like, and we back it up to the data and the testing, and as luck would have it, then it's right. So it's it has been like it's been some journey, from 20 years ago, trying to convince people that we weren't crazy altogether talking about recycling and repurposing of material, till today, where we're getting request after request. Can you make this out of this? It's just it has been such a journey. And I think the exciting thing for me personally is that we're as I said earlier, we're just scratching the surface of it. Where we're going with, the ability to increase the production capability of projects that are already installed, the add-ons that would allow people to go after different materials and have here. It was a lot of these materials will be, as they process more and more of them, they will by naturally just get more and more difficult. And the customer said that that's the real fun part of it for me, is that our customers are so ambitious. They don't really see barriers. They just want to find a solution how to overcome something. So if a customer of ours is told or asked the question, can you wash this? Can you remove that contaminant? Can you do that? It's a question like, just tell me how. Don't bore me with all the details about how ways are difficult. Just tell me how to do it. And that's where I'm excited to see where this industry ends up, and I've no doubt the legislation will follow it. I think one of the big things that comes out of these discussions, and the discussions that I will have with people globally, is that there's a misconception that somebody else has it easier. Australia has it easier than Europe because of that legislation. Or UK has it easier than the US because of this. The reality is that bit is that bit. The legislation bit is that bit. That would make it. It's not easy for anybody. It's just you need that real ambitious entrepreneur to be the pioneer. And once, like I always said, metal bros metal. Once you're that one person in there, you'll find that it tends to multiply and be more accepted. And
the pioneers de-risk it for them at that stage.
That's right.
That's right.
We talked a bit there about our ambitions and our kind of plans around developing that market. So now we're down to trying to get towards 100% diversion from landfill. We'll probably down to that final few percentage points. What are we looking at to reach 100?
You take Scandinavia, for example. Their clays, that last 20%, are still quite porous. Okay, so it's great for the water treatment part, and you can handle your sludges and the cakes quite simply. So it's still quite porous, so it doesn't lend itself to a liner. So let's try and find something that will capture the vast majority of all of that. A process for the cake, and then market for the cake that takes you from your 50% 20 years ago to your 20% now, and reach to there's a 100% bonus there.
No, it's definitely exciting times for the industry, the way it's diversifying and changing, and more customers are coming on board with the concept of washing. The beauty of washing is the rain doesn't stop you. Dry screening, cushion, it's weather dependent. The beauty of washing, it just creates other revenue streams where normal processing would fall short. So it's definitely exciting times, isn't it, for the industry.
Yeah, I think we're probably just about out of time for today. So just wanted to give you maybe the last chance to share your last few kind of insight or a little bit of information you want people to.
I was just waiting to find out when Union cracks the cone on that filter cake. There's notes with everybody.
Yeah.
We'll have to go for a copyright.
I think that as you could pick up maybe from this, like, this conversation could go on for hours. It's one that I'm hugely passionate about. It's one the business is hugely passionate about. The message I'd like to get across is that the evolution to where we are today has been phenomenal. We've supported, I say, over 180 million tons of material diverted from landfill. You don't do that unless you're able to do something with it. We have the technology, we have the capability, we have the experience and the evidence of how we've taken that material and put it back into the construction market without any restriction, or without any compromise. And on that foundation, we're just going to launch on and keep doing it and keep diverting material away from landfill, and maybe you make a better world 1 ton at a time. But that's the way we'll continue.
Yes, so thanks very much, everyone. As Eunice said there, we can probably have another episode and delve a bit deeper into some of those topics at another time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
For more information about CDE's CD&E solution, please check out the links below.